of Life Journey. I'm Dr. Ralph Smith. As you know, if you're a frequent viewer of our program, we talk about a lot about life, different elements of your life, things you can do to relieve your stress, and then also we talk about some current events. And this is definitely a current event what we're talking about. It's not our job to be judgmental, it's our job to provide information. And in my summary, at the end of the segment, I'll give you my opinion. But let me tell you what we're going to talk about today. What we're going to talk about is legalized marijuana, cannabis. A lot of people do use different terms. And in the state of Washington, we were among the leaders here in the state of Washington of allowing legal marijuana, along with Colorado. Now, since then, there's been other states that have followed. A lot of states took the position of decriminalizing marijuana, and others went to full legalization. But with the legalization comes a lot of rules and regulations, and of course the involvement of the state. And we have the owner of Hidden Bush with us. Randy will be joining us in this next segment of the show, and we can go into all those details. Oh, just a second.
I'm not the owner.
You're not the owner?
No.
I'm sorry. You can cut that part. I
Yeah.
assumed you were okay. This is what happened. You're going to be okay?
Yeah, just say pretty soon we're going to be joined by...
Okay. You ready?
Yep.
Pretty soon we're going to be joined by Randy, and Randy will explain, and to me by explaining, talk about the dynamics of operating one of these shops in the state of Washington, some of the benefits, maybe some of the negatives they face, but perhaps most important is actually explain what goes on in an operation like this. A lot of folks will look at what they read in the paper, and for a lot of our listeners and viewers and folks that have been involved with Jenny Marie, you're all over the United States, so there's always these different things you hear. But we're actually going to hear from, in a sense, from Randy, so you know what the real story is. Now, the advent of marijuana goes back many years. As you folks know, I'm well into my 60s at this point, and a lot of people said to me, they said, Dr. Ralph, how can you go through all the hippie stages, the flower children stages, the pushing of LSD, all these different drugs, and never use a drug? How are you able to do that? Well, the reality is I've never judged it. We have 5,000 graduates of folks who have gone through our educational classes dealing with substance abuse, so it's not to do with that. What it has to do with is the fact of where you are in your life. What are the things you need in order to move ahead? The fact that it was a criminal offense back in those days, you bet that was a huge detriment. You think back in those days when I practiced in 5 states and it was against the law, and the thought of reading a headline or seeing me on television with an illegal drug, would that cause me to pause? Absolutely. But to be quite candid with you, I've always taken a position since becoming a doctor well over 30 years ago that I'm not a judge of anything for other people. I make decisions based on what's good for myself, my family, and the folks that surround me, including the company of Alpine Productions. So my real responsibility in life's journey, and I mean real responsibility, is to provide information to our listeners and our viewers, and then you folks, it's your job to take that information and make whatever decision is best for you. It is ironic when you consider the legalization of marijuana, especially in the area of Pullman, Washington, where people that live in Idaho across the state line, which is right next to Moscow, Idaho, and the University of Idaho, and of course in Pullman, Washington State University, that by crossing that line, that state line, what a difference does it make, and as far as legally involving marijuana. I've always grown up with the thought, even through high school, that one of the things that folks, even guys that played football and baseball with me, would always use marijuana, kind of viewed it like it's like alcohol, like it's just another drug or another way to relax or whatever the case might be. And our argument at that time, and I can remember this back in high school, was the fact that marijuana was somewhat of a gateway drug. The problem is you'd have to get it illegally. The problem is you'd have to get it off pushers who provided not only that drug, but tried to sell you other drugs, and that's how I got the term gateway drug. A lot of scientific information would indicate that marijuana is not any more dangerous than alcohol, and yet alcohol could be considered a gateway drug also, except in the excesses. And that's really what this is all about. So each individual, based on the information they have, their needs in life, have to make the decision. But today, you're going to hear the true story of what it's like to operate a legal marijuana shop and find out for yourself how the state of Washington has handled this since they legalized marijuana. After this break, Randy will join us and we'll talk about his operation and talk about the things that he does to ensure not only the public safety, but the safety of his consumers. We'll be right back after this short break. Welcome back to Life's Journey. I'm Dr. Ralph Smith, and now we're going to talk about legalized marijuana. not in a historical sense, not in reading it in a newspaper, from a gentleman who's actually involved day to day with this type of operation. And once again, I want to remind you that different states have different regulations. So when we talk about the different things that relate to this marijuana shop, we are relating to it as by Washington law and Washington codes. If you are a user of the product, please check in your home state to see what the regulations are. So I want to kind of do that disclaimer just so you know that what we talk about here relates directly to the state of Washington, and all the other states can pretty well do their own thing. Colorado is closely mirrored to this, but we'll talk more about that in just a second. Well, I'd like to introduce Randy. Randy operates this beautiful store. In fact, it's absolutely gorgeous here. Especially that aquarium I fall in love with, but he's assured me I can't take it with me, so I won't. But this Hidden Bush is located on Highway 101 here in Port Angeles, Washington. They also have a second store that is in Sequim, Washington, which is a sister community about 15 miles away. And Randy will talk a little bit about that. But let's focus our attention on the Hidden Bush. First of all, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
Appreciate it. Well, I have been aware of this from afar. I obviously have patients who I deal with. I give information regarding substance and all. But I have seen your store develop. This is the first time I've been in it. But I have seen other stores pop up all along the way. And I want to thank you on behalf of our company to allow us the opportunity to come in your store and interview you about Hidden Bush.
Yeah, thanks for the opportunity.
Well, we're excited about this. I've been looking forward to it. Randy, why don't you give us a little history on how this store got started, some of the hoops you had to jump through to get it up and running and create such a beautiful store as we see today.
We started in medical, actually. We had a medical for 4 years before we went into the recreational hubbub.
Right.
We actually had a full store built out down about a block down next to Walmart, and then the county rezoned a gymnastics studio to give us the booth after we're already done about our finals. So then we had to, luckily we found this place, we got in, got it going, and we were still the first one open in Baldwin County.
Yes, I'm aware of that.
By quite a long ways. And just a lot of inspections, a lot of random, you get a lot of random activity as far as with the state. They come in, they do a lot of random ID checks. They're really necking down on advertising, how much you can advertise.
Right.
That's probably one of the biggest things with getting open, getting your name out there.
Right.
Because you're only allowed one sign above the door. So you can't advertise like we had flags, we had to take those down. So it's hard to get people to catch your eye of your business.
However, you got a great location here
Thank you,
on
thank
Highway 101 in Port Angeles. In addition to that, you've spread yourself as a good reputation for this store. I know that I work with city council members and also the county commissioner. In fact, one of our commissioners, Bill Peach, does his own show on Calhoun County Report on our network. So establishing a reputation is really 2/3 of the battle.
Yes.
Without a doubt.
No, yeah.
Now, you mentioned this, and I'm aware of how this works, but just for the benefit of our viewers and listeners to the program, explain the difference of it being, quote, the medical side of it, and then when you go into recreational use, because I know a lot of states, including California, which is another state that I practice in, that it has always been on the medical side, and they had to run down and get a note from a medical doctor and all these things. So why don't you explain to our folks that are tuned in exactly what the difference is between the two?
So the biggest difference is, on the medical side, we could grow our own cannabis, we could make our own hashes, we could make all our own edibles, we can make our own RSOs, and we could actually take care of the patient a lot better. Because we would, if somebody say had cancer or MS, we would give them their medicine for the month.
Or glaucoma, which is something that marijuana has been proven to be an excellent
Right.
remedy for.
Yeah. Arthritis too.
Yes.
A huge one, especially in the STEM community with the retired people.
Right.
But that was the biggest difference. We were in control of everything. We knew exactly what was in all our products. It was all organic. And we could take care of patients, whereas now you have to get it from a farm. Everything has to come in packaged.
And it's certified by the state.
Certified by the state.
These farms and what we would call distributors in the business, they all have to meet certain requirements too.
Yes.
But it kind of limits the competition too, which can of course drive your prices up.
No, right.
That's a big deal.
Right, and then now it's lot more social media is a bigger part of it. The farms that have the biggest social media presence are the ones that people know about.
Right.
So your hands are kind of tied. There's a lot of really good products on the 502 market. You just only have limited shelf space, right?
Right.
So you got to kind of go through it. You got to pick the best of each one.
Now, in the medical days, and let's just keep it separate between medical and recreational, they had to bring a prescription in. I assume you almost had to be like a pharmacist to make sure it was a legitimate prescription by a doctor who was qualified and authorized to write a prescription. I don't know if it required Department of Pharmacy or who's ever involved. Was it more difficult taking care of the individual client to come in to make sure they had a legitimate prescription, or is it more difficult now in the recreational stage?
So I would say it was probably easier before because it was both then and now. You're just doing it the first initial time. On the medical side, before recreational was involved, they had a different permitting process to get your medical license. And it was on tamper-proof paper. You always said, and you always called the doctor. You had to call and verify it with the doctor before you entered him into the system.
That's excellent.
That
takes care of a lot of the fraud.
Exactly. So you just did it the initial time. They were in your system. They had to bring that card with them every single time, or else they can't get served because sometimes they expire. The biggest thing is people trying to tamper with them back then, trying to change a 2 to a 7 or 7 to 2. Now they come in. Initial time they get scanned. They get your paperwork. You go through this state system called Airlift. You enter in their code. And what it does, verifies that they're medical, and then now they, instead of carrying around that big piece of paper all the way time, now they get a laminated card that's good everywhere, and they can keep it in their wallet.
Now, it's probably not a fair comparison, Randy, but again, I don't know a lot about this area, so I'm just going to ask some questions which may appear to be a little bit dumb, but it's going to be a question. Could you compare, when you talk about the medical side, of being like a pharmacy, where in a sense, you're not pharmacists obviously, but you have a lot of rules and regulations on the pharmaceutical side, and then if somebody wanted something else, they could buy it basically off the counter that wasn't related to that. Is that fair to say?
No, yeah. Okay. Your medical prescription gave you access to everything in that store.
Okay.
Was it just for edibles or RSO or just to grow? Yeah.
Now, as we move forward, the state of Washington, through their voters, and we always want to remind our viewers and listeners that this was an act voted upon by the state of Washington's voters. So let's make sure we're clear on that. When you went to recreational, then the emphasis changed to other factors. Obviously, you shared it with us briefly. You had to buy from, for lack of another term, regulated suppliers. You also have a sign out there stating very clearly about being over 21. I don't know if that was a requirement also in the medical stage. But I imagine, in a sense, and boy, this is not meant to be a slam on you, but it's a sense, it's almost like operating a bar, where if you sell something to someone that's under the age of 21 and don't check IDs, you could be in a world of hurt. Is that fair to say?
No, that's very fair to say. And they're very on it. We actually have ID scanners and scan it, and it doesn't send information anywhere, but it tells us the expiration date, it tells us the exact age. And we scan anybody that appears to be under 40. Okay. Because it is very regulated.
So Randy, would you have to scan me?
No.
Thank you. Thank you. You could have lied and said, yes, doctor. You're going to make me feel good, but you're an honest man. All right, but you'd have to scan Sean for sure.
Yes.
No, he's our VP of broadcasting, but he's got that baby face. I'd scan him anyway, just to be sure. But anyway, but the fact of the matter is then when they're over 21, they still have access to everything now, but they don't need the card. Is that correct?
Right.
Now, do you sell vaping supplies or anything like that that tie to this same type of industry?
We do sell vaping cartridges, but they're marijuana cartridges.
Okay.
They're not like e-juice.
Okay, so it's just another form to be able to take in marijuana.
In 502, we're only allowed to sell marijuana and accessories used for marijuana.
Okay.
That's why we have our Swatch marks.
Okay, so that's important for people to know. So for people who are vaping, in a sense, that's just another form of taking in marijuana.
Yeah.
If they're buying their vaping supplies from you. I'm sure in other areas, they just have regular vaping supplies and things. Now, if you have a situation, and I'm, again, just trying to relieve some people's concerns out there, that someone walks in here and wants to buy a bunch of this stuff, there is a limit to how much they can buy per visit. And what is that limit?
So you're allowed 1 ounce, 28 grams of marijuana per person. That's the only one you really run into. The other ones is, I believe it's 100 fluid ounces of liquid.
Okay.
I do have the printout over there. You're allowed 7 grams of concentrate
Okay.
per thing, which is more than enough.
Okay.
More than enough for personal.
And how often can they come? Can they visit you every day, or does it have to be staged?
No, they can actually bring it in. They can buy the ounce, take it home, and come back. As long as they're not in possession of more than an ounce at a time.
Okay.
If they smoke that much, then they can come back and get more.
Now, I've talked to the Clallam County Sheriff Department, and they have not noticed an uptick of people who are, quote, intoxicated with marijuana. So that would indicate people are being somewhat efficient on how they use it. But I'm assuming they cannot smoke here, or even do their edibles here. And they're allowed to do it out in their car if they're parked in your parking lot. They have to actually
They're not
go
allowed to be
home.
on our premises
Okay.
to consume it.
So they got to go home, or they have to go somewhere at least off the premises here.
Yes, sir.
What does your staff do, or what do your folks do, if someone comes in and to you feel, just a gut feel, you do it every day, and your staff does, that someone's overly intoxicated, for lack of another term, with marijuana, and you feel it's unsafe to sell them that product, would you still sell it to them?
No, we would deny them just
Okay,
like
so just like a bartender.
Yes, yes.
Okay. What's the hardest part in operating, and there may be more than one, but what's the toughest part about operating a marijuana store here in Port Angeles?
The hardest part is advertising, is getting attention drawn to your building as you're going by. A lot of people have popped up around us. Since
Well,
we've
yeah,
been here.
a lot of competition.
There's a lot of people coming up around us, and luckily we have a good reputation for coming from medical,
Right.
and we have quite the following. The hardest part is really getting your name out there and staying compliant with the state.
Okay. Now, I imagine in promoting, since you're limited in advertising, it's really like real estate, location, location, location. So as long as you have a good location, a good reputation, certainly a good mouth-to-mouth type of spread of the deal, not to play on marijuana there. But all those things is what you have to build your business. It's not like you're operating a hamburger stand and you're featuring quarter pounders for 99 cents.
Right. No, right. And it's a lot about quality of your product, knowing your product, knowing what to look for, knowing how, knowing that you're giving the best product for the best price to your customer.
You know, I mentioned before in the earlier stage of my presentation to you about being a gateway drug. And I know that one of the arguments of legalizing marijuana was the fact it would take that gateway drug out of the hands of pushers so that people legitimately could buy marijuana. But here's the problem with that analogy. What has it done on pricing? Because I noticed from people I have talked to, especially patients of mine, they claim that since it's moved out of the medical side into the recreational side, the price has gone up quite a bit. And then on top of that, much like the state did when they started allowing certain retail outlets to now sell alcohol, by the time they're done with all their taxes, it drives the price up too. And you notice that even if you buy some vodka in Costco, it might start off being $13. And then by the time it's done, you're paying $25 because of all the taxes. How much of an impact does that have on your product?
That is the biggest impact. Honestly, if it wasn't for all the state taxes, it would actually be cheaper to get it in recreation than it was in medical. It's over 40%, 37% excise, and you have your 8.2 or 8.4 sales tax, depending on where that's lying. That's right off the top.
Wow. And that all adds up.
All adds up.
Has your acquisition cost gone up too, now that you're using these regulated restrictions?
Yeah, the biggest deal is, before when you're growing everything, you have complete control over your cost structure.
Right.
Now, the farms are, they have a bottom line they have to meet, and you have a bottom line you have to meet. It's a lot more, going more of a corporate structure as far as the farms go.
Right. Now, I'm not going to try to drag you through politics, but I have at least one political question I'll ask you, and then I'll have a closing question in our segment. With the Trump administration, of course, Attorney General Jeff Sessions, at least if he's still there today, we don't know.
Yeah, right.
Trump goes through people like some people go through toilet paper. And they're picking fights with all over the place between Korea, Venezuela, of course our disaster we had in Virginia over this past weekend. Sessions made it clear as Attorney General, he is not happy with the fact that marijuana is legal. And he has mentioned that perhaps he wants to take that on and close down these evil shops, as he calls it. Now, the Attorney General of Washington has made it very clear that he will defend this all the way to the Supreme Court if he has to. And so far, they've been busy putting their fingers in other issues and haven't got involved. But is that something that worries you? Because this not only has jobs here, there's quite an investment in the store. And if all of a sudden the feds were to step in, it would create some problems. And the back half of that question is, because there's a federal issue, you don't have the conveniences like some people do of being able to take credit cards, debit cards, being able to use traditional banks. So it's created a security issue too for you because of having to handle the money. How do you feel about all that?
You know, it definitely is worrisome. Anytime that anything can threaten your livelihood with a sign of a bill, you've got to pay attention to it. I personally don't feel like it will happen just because of, at the end of the day, the government loves money.
Right.
And at the end of the day, they are getting a lion king share of
Without
money.
risking anything.
Without risking anything.
Yes.
Without risking anything. There's no write-offs. You can't write off your employee wages.
Right.
You can't write off your inventory. There's no write-offs. But you still have to pay all your federal taxes, even though it's federally legal.
Right.
So you're paying them everything with no write-offs, which most businesses wouldn't even be able to survive
Right.
without those write-offs.
And all that brings a cost, which of course is borne by your consumers.
Yes.
And as I can tell, you're pretty busy today, so obviously it's worked out pretty well for you. Last question. Looking ahead, and that's exactly the way I think you got to look at it, but looking ahead, where do you see this business a year, 3 years from now?
I see it still growing, you know. I see more people getting their eyes open to it. You're still seeing people come in that haven't smoked in a long time, especially from other states.
Right.
I personally, in 3 to 5 years, I would like it to be a, more of a franchise situation.
I see. And of course, with the tourists, you've got that issue. I'm sure you got to give them the ground rules that this is not,
Yeah.
you're not a distributor where they pack it in their luggage and think they can take it home.
No,
right?
yes. You have to let them know that everything has to be consumed in the
Right.
state. And their minds, a lot of times, are just blown. We have usually carry over 100 different strains of cannabis. Most people are used to whatever their buddy had, especially the ones from down south. Like
Right.
they come up from Texas, they'll be standing at that door and looking at the road and make sure no cops are coming.
Right.
So it's fun. It's evolving. And you never really get bored because nothing's ever really the same. Between
Right.
the state changing laws, you trying to better yourself, and just staying current, there's always these variables that make it exciting.
Well, we appreciate all that information. I know you have another staff member that wants to jump in and become famous. And so hopefully you'll remember us as you become a big TV star. Okay?
Yes, sir.
Well, God bless you. Good
thank
luck
you.
and be safe.
Yes, thank you.
All right, thank you. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Life's Journey. Once again, I'm Dr. Ralph Smith. We're here at the Hidden Bush here in Port Angeles, Washington. We're focusing on the issue of legalized marijuana and how businesses have adapted to that, the rules and regulations required for individuals. And I can tell you, since getting here, we've been quite busy seeing people come and go, and that's a good thing. Well, Sean's joining us now, and what we're going to focus on with Sean is talk more about the difference between the requirements and dealing with folks that had to have medical prescriptions versus recreational. So Sean, welcome aboard. Good to see you, buddy. All right. You've been with the company, as you mentioned before, off-site here or off-air since the beginning, so you have another unique perspective. Working for a marijuana shop and being involved in it like you have, one of the main issues that I spent some time talking to Randy about was the issue of the medical side of it versus now recreational side. What's the big difference that you've noticed?
I'd say the biggest difference is everybody that was medical before coming into the recreational market, it's a little bit of a shock. They were used to, big quarter-pound jars, being able to grab it, smell it, sniff it. It was definitely a lot more in-depth. You could spend a lot more time with a patient and cater to their needs and stuff. And you got to kind of get people a little bit in and out down here. The other big difference is the cost, particularly with edibles, since the state regulates the edibles to 10 milligrams per piece. when we were medical, you could have like 100, 200 milligram brownie, and that was okay. But luckily, the prices of the marijuana and the topicals and stuff have come down to a pretty fair price. But the one area that's still a little off is the edibles. The other fact being, obviously, recreational. Anybody that's 21 over can come in, so you're just about anybody. And with medical, you had to have a marijuana recommendation from your doctor to come in. But there's definitely some differences, but I'm kind of happy with the point that it's reached so far.
Now, Sean, let's move over to the recreational side, because that's what we're talking about. I'm making the assumption that there's no longer medical and recreation. It's now all recreation. Is that true, or?
That's actually not correct. What they've done is they've merged the systems together. So now recreational stores have the ability to get their medical endorsement. And at that point, if they get that, they're allowed to actually take in medical patients, and we are actually the ones responsible for creating their medical card. So they have to have the medical recommendation from their doctor, but at that point, we enter them into the Washington State database, enter their information, take a picture, and create them a medical card in which they can use. And they can take that any store in the state that has their medical endorsement. Not every single store in the state is going to have their medical endorsement, but most of them will, because by not, you're kind of missing on a potential revenue stream. But yeah, they merged them together so we can still kind of cater to medical people. They do get a sales tax break. They're able to buy 3 times the amount as the average person that comes in here, and they're also allowed to grow. So there are still some advantages that exist for medical patients.
And then obviously Hidden Bush, and also your store down in Swim, what's the name of that? I was going to ask.
Karma Cannabis.
Okay, so both those stores, they can have both medical and recreational?
Yes, sir. Yes.
Okay, super. And then people who have the medical card, they know the difference, so they're going to buy medical rather than go the recreational side. So in a sense, you qualify your customer, whether they're a medical customer or they're a recreational side. Is that correct?
Yeah, I mean 99% of the products though aren't the same. It's not like they're picking between a pool of medical marijuana while everyone else is getting this recreational marijuana. They're all pretty much picking from the same marijuana strains. The only department that's different would be with high potency edibles. Medical patients are allowed to have more than 10 milligrams per piece or more than 100 milligrams in a package. I haven't seen a lot from the producer processors that have created a lot of these products. We have a couple on our shelves right now, but it doesn't seem like the processors are jumping on this, or maybe they just haven't found us at this point. So we don't have a lot of those products, but other than that, they are pretty much picking from the same pool of high quality products.
Now again, folks are going to be seeing this film all over the world with YouTube and all the other locations of our networks. So we need to once again remind them that everything we're talking about is for the state of Washington.
Yes.
Because we don't want people to take this and say, boy, this is my chance, and get themselves in trouble.
Yes.
Because they might want us to pay for their lawyer expenses.
Right.
Let's talk about someone who walks through that door into this beautiful shop, and believe me, it is absolutely gorgeous. And they are wanting to buy marijuana for the first time. Now, you've already, Randy explained, it doesn't matter whether they're a tourist or not. They just have to have an ID and stuff. But I want you to walk us through what is expected of someone, because there may be someone watching this film that lives in Washington. I know Colorado has some similarities too. And of course we got Oregon, Alaska, and California. So this is really spread, especially out here in the West. But explain when someone walks through that door, what can they expect that they're going to be asked or shown before they can buy their marijuana?
Well, they're going to be asked pretty much immediately to be showing us their ID. It has to be valid, it can't be expired. It's okay to be out of state. It can even be a temporary driver's license. It just has to be valid. We have processes where we double check all vertical IDs, because that means the person got their ID before they were 21. They might be 21 now. And so we double check that with another employee. But after that's done, it's pretty much free reign at that point, and they can expect to just have a whole wide selection of products to choose from. Really, the best thing to do is to trust your bud tender, ask your bud tender questions, because whether they're wanting something for day, something for night, whether they're wanting edibles, and then we just kind of guide them through the process.
Now there's no special customer card or or like what you see at Safeway, a Safeway Club card or anything like that. All you care about is the legal ID that they're over 21, or explaining what you have beyond that.
That is correct. I mean, all they need in order to come in is ID, but we do have a loyalty program in place. The one that we have set up at this particular shop, because it can vary, some people might not have one at all, is every dollar you spend earns you a point. Once you get to 400 points, you get a nice discount. The discount that we offer is 25% off of any item you want to use it on. You could use it on an eighth and save $10, or you could use it on an ounce and potentially save $70. Use it on a $300 bong, we don't care what, it's just on one item. And then we also have lots of daily sales. Each day of the week there's something different going on.
Now, how protected is their information? Because I assume that you take down the ID, probably their address, maybe their email address, phone number. I mean, I don't know what information you take. And what if their employer, even though it's legal in Washington, tries to find out if they come here? Is that all protected?
Basically, all we take for that reason is first and last name. Sometimes we'll do a birthday if it's a common name, and it's really just to differentiate. If you're a Dave Johnson, there might be 2 or 3 of them, so we want a little bit more of an identifier. Sometimes we'll just do the middle initial, but we don't take their address, we don't take an email address, we don't take any other info. Other stores might, you know, a lot of times other stores, the whole point of their program is to get email addresses so they can send them stuff, but we're not like that. We don't want to take part of text programs or email because we don't want to bug people any more than what they want. But as far as protection goes, as far as I know, the point of sale system that we use currently, BioTrack, they've got they've got their servers, their firewalls and whatnot and stuff. So, I mean, really, we don't share the information. The state of Washington is and collecting all these names for any reason. But even then, for people that are still, you know, paranoid, so to speak, we let them come up with whatever, you know, you can be Daffy Duck. Tell us your Queen Elizabeth, and as long as they remember and they give us that name each time, our main goal is just to get them that discount. So some people do use it.
Well, your brother Sean, who's our executive VP of broadcasting, he's already used Daffy Duck, so don't promote
It's
that.
taken.
Okay?
It's taken.
I guess that's supposed to be a secret. If indeed you were called up by the governor of the state, Governor Inslee is one hell of a good governor in my opinion, and Jay were to call you up and say, you know what, Sean, we want to change the law a little bit, we want to do some things to improve our current program. And let's say he called you up and asked you to be an advisor for that. And I doubt if he'd pay you, but at least he'd feed you lunch. If the governor did that, what advice would you give him, or what advice would you give the legislature on how possibly they could improve this law to maybe make it just easier, but certainly make it better for folks who just want to come in, get what they need, and leave?
You know, honestly, I don't know if there's a whole lot of areas of improvement. The only thing that I notice is that they are still kind of making some things up as they go along, because it is still kind of a new industry. They realize some issues, they talk about it in legislation, they come up with some new stuff. Recently, they made it to where the average citizen, they're talking about it to where they can grow a couple plants. Because right now, as far as I know, don't quote me on it, Washington's the only state that has recreational marijuana that doesn't allow the average citizen to grow a couple plants. But they've just now kind of gotten the processes of changing that. But, you know, really, it's really easy to get whatever you want. You just have to have the valid ID. You've got a wide range of products. I'd say the only area that they might need to improve is coming up with, you know, maybe freeing up higher potency products, but I know why they control that.
Sure. Any court interference at all? Much like in alcohol, they tell people they put them on parole or probation, they're not allowed to drink alcohol. Is there any court interference at all?
We've had a letter from, I believe, military saying that we're not supposed to be helping military people. But other than that, really, I think it kind of falls on the individual. Obviously, we don't know whether somebody's on parole or whether they are not allowed into an alcohol shop, or it's the chief item of sale or anything like that. So there's really no way for us to tell. But the only thing that I've ever had personally was there was a letter that was sent that I imagine that was sent to all of them that said that we're really not supposed to be selling products to, you know, veterans, people of military affiliation.
And that's back to the federal law.
Yeah.
Because again, there's still a little debate on that.
Yeah.
My final question for you, my friend, and thank you again for spending the time. What would an average person, and whoever average means, walk in here and buy marijuana the first time? How much would they spend normally on an average if it was a financial issue for them?
You know, I think the best thing to do would base it off of what the average I see. We kind of have a little bit of sales competitions around here, who has the most in a month and who has the highest ticket average. And Usually the ticket average is right around $30, give or take. Sometimes as low as 25, sometimes as high as 35. So I think that's because you're gonna have the person that comes in and buys just a gram or two, you know, $10, $20, or a pre-roll joint, and then you're gonna have somebody that buys, you know, an eighth or more. You get the occasional person that buys the half ounce and stuff. But yeah, you know, I'd say anywhere between $20 to $40 is kind of the average.
So for the person that wants to experiment, it's not like putting down a bunch of money.
No, you could come in with even just $10 and get a couple pre-rolls, have a couple different flavors. If you were looking for edibles, you'd be able to get, you know, 2 or 3 different edibles for around $10, $15.
Well, Sean, I want to thank you for your time you spent. I know it's kind of a quick show. I'll throw you in with the starring role you have. Remember us when you get an agent, okay? And then we'll rock and roll with this. But we sure appreciate your participation in the show.
Appreciate having me.
Take care of yourself. God bless. When we return, we'll have my closing summary of what I think about this type of business and how it affects the residents of the state of Washington. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Life's Journey with Dr. Ralph Smith. We want to thank the fine folks at the Hidden Bush here in Port Angeles, Washington, especially Randy and his crew. And we also want to acknowledge, which we didn't in the film earlier, that the fact they've won now 4 years in a row as the best cannabis shop in Clallam County. And considering how many of those shops are out here, that's indeed a big honor. Also want to remind our people that you need to check with each rules, laws, regulations for your individual state. We broadcast and are seen all over the United States and also in the world with YouTube. So I don't want you to take that anything that was said in that video is the true for everywhere. Pretty well up and down the western United States, including Alaska, Washington, Oregon, and even now the state of California, basically have legalized marijuana for recreational uses, and of course they've had the medical use. However, other states located within the United States may have different regulations. So for our folks that pay attention to this show and view this show, please don't take it as an indication that there's legalized marijuana where you live, because you need to check on that. I don't want you to call me in the middle of the night and bail you out. Folks, the issue of legalized marijuana is a very controversial issue. And as someone who is a healthcare provider like myself, who help people with their addictions with substances, whether it be alcohol, marijuana, prescribed medication sometimes, and all that, I have a general feeling of trying to address the problem and then provide a cure. But I don't think it's quite fair for a lot of folks to believe that because marijuana is legalized, it's marijuana's fault now. It's really the people's decision, and it's a matter of choice of whether they want to legalize marijuana in their particular states. And like everything else that the people decide, restraint and proper management of your life is the paramount issue. I'm sure after Prohibition, the same arguments were made against alcohol. I know that those issues can cross over into the abortion issue with Roe v. Wade. It's now crossing over in marijuana. It's largely a matter of choice. But with choice comes responsibility. And I want to make certain that everyone understands who's watched this film that I'm not an advocate for the use of any substance, to be honest with you. But I am an advocate of the right to choose and to have choice. So if you want to be a good, solid American, we follow all of our laws, not just the ones we choose to follow. However, and this is what I'm trying to get across in this segment, if you do decide to use marijuana, you need to show some restraint. It is addictive, it does have side effects, and if you're willing to take those risks or take those cautions and throw them to the wind, that's up to you. But remember, if you go on the road and you're intoxicated with marijuana, that's the same as being legally drunk. And when you get on the road and with your cars, you're going to endanger a family out there who their only sin was they were on the road at the same time you were. So for those people who need that marijuana or feel that cannabis is important to them to try to relieve them of their stresses and worries, do it in the privacy of your home, do it within the legalized limits in each of the states, and for God's sake, don't get in a car. Now, one of the issues we did not talk about, and I'll touch briefly before we say goodbye in this show segment, is that there are medical needs for this. It's a scientific fact that people with glaucoma and other type of eye disturbances, that marijuana tends to calm that situation down. That's the reason why in California, when the issue of marijuana was first brought up, it was mostly for medical reasons. And that's how people would get these medical cards issued by medical doctors and to make it a legitimate need. There are people who are going through issues of the end of their life and the pains and the necessary evils that can hit them, and I say necessary evils that are going to happen regardless. Marijuana tends to calm those situations and to make them more comfortable, almost like a sedative. So there are different medical reasons why people should use and could use marijuana. And again, for those folks, I understand it fully. I would just ask you to talk to your healthcare providers and make sure that indeed that is the right path to take. And that's very important to do. Now, for all the young kids and the younger adults out there who've always had the curiosity of being able to smoke marijuana, but they did not want to do it because of the fact of it being illegal. The primary purpose when this drive first started, especially in Colorado, and I came and appeared on some radio shows talking about the possibility of legalization in Colorado, is the fact that it would take these users of marijuana, who are basically view marijuana as an entry drug, and take them away from the pushers and away from the people who would offer different kind of drugs like it was a 7-Eleven convenience store. And that by doing this legally, it would take those people away from those pushers and be able to have them try marijuana if it's legal in their state, and to be able to use it and see what effect it has upon them. There are a lot of different effects based on your makeup chemically, and of course your makeup and the type of marijuana you use, and there's different grades of marijuana. But the reality is, it is a drug. Just like alcohol is a drug. Like not practicing safe sex could force you in an abortion situation. And all these factors are things you have to consider. My main calling at January Wellness is to help people who get court-ordered substance training required or education, or people who have a serious problem that it's out of control. And we treat those problems. We don't judge you, but we treat those problems. But the value of having this taken away from street pushers, which by the way is still illegal if you buy it from a non-state licensed shop, or whatever the case might be, to be able to provide it as a way to get away drugs away, that has somewhat been diminished because of the fact that all states, including the state of Washington, got greedy. And they got greedy by charging extreme taxes on all of these patterns of sin, as they call them. And all the states have done that. They've done that in the same case of alcohol, when a lot of these states, including Washington, got out of the alcohol business because the people of this great state of Washington voted for it to be privatized. The answer was that, okay, privatize it. They control it, the distribution of alcohol through the state and their state-approved distributors, and they put some pretty heavy-duty taxes on it. And people are finding that out when they go to Costco or they go to Walmart or whatever in the state of Washington, that they find out what the shelf price says and what they walk out with is a lot of difference. And shame on the states that they exploit that. You can't have it both ways. But overall, as we talk about marijuana, we talk about substance use, the key point of this is to ask yourself the question, why do you need that marijuana? If you need that marijuana because of all the stress in your life, or you're an unhappy person, or whatever the case might be, using marijuana for that purpose is like putting a Band-Aid on a cut. Sometimes the cut heals, and sometimes the cut will become infected. So the key question you have to ask yourself is that if you're a weekend user of marijuana, and you smoke marijuana in the state of Washington with your friends to giggle and laugh and have a good time, which is the same thing as drinking beers or drinking hard liquor, I'm not overly concerned about that. But what I am concerned about are folks that have, like alcoholics do unfortunately, have the need for the product so much they have to do it to maintain their life. And if you find yourself in that situation, then I want you to watch the ending credits of this show, and Sean will put our phone number there. You give us a call. Because the idea of using marijuana as a medical solution is absolutely wrong. Because what you're going to find is if you don't reduce your stressors in your life, if you don't change your lifestyle to a point that you can manage your life, and what John Dever used to call a natural high, then you're going to become more and more dependent on it. And it's referred to as self-medication. So if you're self-medicating yourself between the marijuana, the alcohol that you might drink, or any other type of substance, you're not a doctor. You should not self-medicate yourself on it. That's why the pharmacies are in business. So really examine your need for marijuana. Now, as far as the regulations, and now the sales, the retail sales of marijuana, I am really applauding the state of Washington, other than the taxes they charge, and the states of Oregon, Alaska, California, and indeed Colorado. Those are the ones I'm most aware of. They're doing thorough background checks. They're making sure that the reporting procedures are in place. They're tracking purchases as far as how many places buy or how many places buy the drugs from the distributor. They're doing a good job of managing it and keeping the criminal element pretty well out of the picture. For that, the state should be applauded. And having those type of responses are very, very important to keep the proper protocol in place. And the state of Washington and Colorado especially have done a great job in that. So my ending comment to you is simply this. If you're using marijuana or alcohol or any other type of high to just make yourself get through the day or get through the week, you need to admit you have a problem. And you need to reach out to healthcare providers, whether it be a counselor, a therapist, a psychiatrist, a psychologist like myself, for help to remove those issues out of your life. If you're doing it as a pleasure-seeking, hey, all of us are getting together and smoke some pot on a Saturday evening at a barbecue in your own private residences, I'm not that concerned about it. But whenever you find that you have to use any substance, whether it's alcohol, whether it's marijuana, or whatever the case is, to get by in your life, that is a clear-cut signal you got a problem, and you need to reach out for help. Again, these fine agencies that are available in all the areas we broadcast, they're not there to judge you, they're there to help you. And keep in mind the role model that you're setting. Because in the state of Washington, and I believe it's the same in other states, you need to be 21 years of age to smoke marijuana legally and to purchase it. So if you're under the age of 21, it's the same thing as trying to buy beer. And there's some stiff penalties for minors who buy beer. And the same thing is in place with marijuana. So on behalf of our entire group at Alpine Productions and Northwest Lindsay Media, we thank you for watching our program tonight. Feel free to save this program there in your media guide so you can repeatedly watch the show and educate your children and other people you care about. And we'll look forward to talking to you soon. Take care of one another, and God bless.